Now the thing is that as I have already stated, that in most of the cases the surety that is granted, the bail that is granted is on surety. That means that a person has to find someone who is solvent, who has property, who has a regular job, who is not a daily wage worker, which it becomes almost impossible to find, especially in urban areas where, like for example in a city of Bombay, where many people live in slums which are not organized housing, where the housing is not recognized, where in a country where only 6 or 7% have jobs which are in the organized sector, 94% work in unorganized sector, many people are daily wage workers, they don't have property. So how do you produce a solvent surety who knows you and who is going to give an undertaking on your behalf, given the fact that most of the people who are arrested are poor? So giving bail, I may be arrested in a bailable offence, but it becomes impossible for me to produce a solvent surety who will stand for me. So recognizing this, and because there have been many cases in which the whole issue of overcrowding of jails, people languishing in jails for years together, delayed trials, poverty related issues where people are arrested for very flimsy cases but are there for years and years in the jail. Now in those cases it was held that even then the person is arrested in a bailable offence, he is given surety. Now ultimately, if an offence is punishable with maximum 3 months, what is the great public purpose that will be served in keeping the person in jail for 3 years because he cannot produce a surety? So the Supreme Court in various cases has held that PR bond should be resorted to. We will be looking at Hussain Ara Khatun's case in a while. But there has also been an amendment to the Constitution which says that to the Code of Criminal Procedure, Section 436, which deals with bailable offence, which says that if a person is arrested in a bailable case and is given a bail order, but even after a week he is still in jail, it will be assumed that he is poor and indigent and therefore he should be released on PR bond. So now we have a section which actually permits a person who is arrested to be released on PR bond in a bailable case within a week of his arrest. Another amendment which was brought in because of the long durations in which people have been kept in jail is Section 436A, which says that if a person has completed half the maximum sentence imposable in the case, except in cases which are punishable with death, the person should be released on bail after half the term is over. Here it is not necessary that the person should be released on PR bond, but the fact is that in a non-bailable offence also, if I am arrested for a serious offence and I am not granted bail and I am still in jail for a very long time, which is half the maximum sentence, I should be released on bail. Now, the Supreme Court in Hussain Ara Khatun's case, which is one of the earliest public interest litigation cases which talked about the conditions, the abysmal conditions in jail, said that many of the people are in jail because they cannot afford bail and they are there in many small offences. Many of the people have also completed more than the maximum term that they would have had to serve had they been convicted. And the court said that many of them are not able to furnish surety. So it said that the courts should use a criteria to satisfy itself that the accused has roots in the community which would deter him from fleeing if released on his personal bond. So what are the criteria that one looks at? One looks at the length of residence in the community, employment status, family ties and relationships, reputation, character and monetary condition, prior criminal record, identity of responsible persons in the community who will vouch for his reliability, the nature of offence charged and the apparent probability of conviction and the likely sentence insofar as these factors are relevant to the risk of non-appearance, and any other factor indicating the ties of the accused to the community or bearing on the risk of willful failure to appear. So basically the Supreme Court was encouraging courts to release people on PR bond even if they had some kind of sufficient stay in the community, even if they were, for example, homeless people or landless labourer or somebody who will not have property but has ties in the community. Now, what are the conditions that result in grant of bail in non-bailable offences? As already stated, bail is discretionary. It is not that people do not get bail. Now, generally the rule is, according to the law under section 437 of the CRPC, if the offence is punishable with death or imprisonment of life or for more than 7 years, then the court should grant the bail. Unless there are reasonable grounds for believing that the person has been guilty of an offence punishable with death or life imprisonment, or when the person has previous convictions of 7 years or more than 2 convictions of 3 years or more. Now, in these cases, if a person has a criminal history, then bail should not be granted. But even in these cases, bail should be granted if the accused is below 16 years of age. Now, with the coming of the Juvenile Justice Act, 18 years, or a woman, or is sick or infirm, or if it considers it just and proper for any other special reason. So, bail even in non-bailable offences should be granted if the punishment is not death or life imprisonment, or if the person does not have a criminal history. Now, what are the conditions for grant of bail in non-bailable offences? The Supreme Court in various judgments has held certain criteria. This is the nature and seriousness of the offence. So, the court, while considering a bail application made on behalf of the accused, has to look at these factors: nature and seriousness of the offence, character of the evidence, whether there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accused is guilty of such an offence. So, if say it's a murder case, but there's hardly any evidence against the person, then that lack of evidence will bear the decision of the court, have a bearing. Circumstances which are peculiar to the accused, such as age, gender, health, family responsibilities, motive for the commission of the offence, and criminal antecedents. Then the reasonable possibility of the presence of the accused not being secured at the time of trial. Reasonable apprehension of that the witnesses will be tampered with or the evidence will be tampered with. Then larger public interest and other considerations which may be specific in the case. So, this is the criteria on the basis of which bail will be decided or not. Now, generally when you are filing a bail application, you can file as many bail applications as you want. When you are produced before the magistrate, you can file a bail application. Even if it is rejected, it does not mean you cannot file another bail application. You can file it, only thing you may have to show change in circumstances. But if the magistrate's court rejects your bail application, generally if it's a sessions triable case, then the magistrate's courts generally hesitate to grant you bail, because remand takes place at the magistrate court level. Now, so then you can go to the sessions court. If the sessions court rejects your bail, you can again file another application in the sessions court, but you can't come back to the magistrate's court and file it unless the sessions court tells you that you can file it before the magistrate. Now, if your sessions court also rejects your bail application and you are not willing to wait to file another one there, you can go to the High Court. If the High Court rejects, you go to the Supreme Court. But once you've gone to the Supreme Court, after 2 years, you can't go back to the magistrate or the Sessions Court or the High Court to file another bail application on change of circumstances. You have to move the Supreme Court only. That is why people prefer to file multiple bail applications in the same lower court rather than go to the High Court, unless they feel confident that you will get bail in the High Court. Now, generally, if there is a bail, if there are more than one accused in a particular case, then generally if one is granted bail, the others are also granted bail on grounds of parity, unless the investigation shows and the charge sheet shows that there is a different role played by all the accused in the case. So, if I am the main accused and my role is very different from the other accused, then I may not be granted bail. Otherwise, I will be granted bail on grounds of parity. Now, once bail is granted, there can be other conditions of bail which are imposed on the person. Like, for example, you have to give your passport, you can't leave the place and go, you have to report to the police station every day or every week or every month. So, there may be several conditions. You should not go to a particular area where the witnesses stay. So, there may be other conditions which are imposed apart from the fact that you've been granted bail of a certain amount of money. So, suppose I go to the police station. I have been asked to report to the police station every single day of the week, and I go there for 3 months. Now the investigation is over, the police just make me sit over there and then I go home. So, I can apply for modification of bail conditions, but these I have to apply in the Sessions Court and the High Court only. The other thing that can be done is that if suppose I have been granted bail and I violate any of the conditions that have been imposed on me, and I go and threaten the witness and tell that person that you dare come to the court and give evidence against me, I will see you, or I go away from the place, I go where I'm not supposed to go, I leave town without, or I don't go to the police station, then my bail can be cancelled. So the courts also have the power to cancel my bail once it is granted. It does not mean that it will never be cancelled. So circumstances have to be shown, an application for cancellation has to be made by the prosecution for cancellation of bail for violation of any conditions. The other types of bail are what is known as anticipatory bail. Now anticipatory bail is before I am arrested, I ask for bail. Now here in this case can be only granted in a non-bailable offence. So anticipatory bail in a bailable offence does not make sense, because as soon as I am arrested I will be released on bail. Anticipatory bail is granted by either the Sessions Court or the High Court. I have to apply and I have to say that I apprehend arrest and I should not be arrested. The court will look at the similar circumstances on whether custodial interrogation is required or not before granting me anticipatory bail. There are other conditions, there are other issues relating to anticipatory bail. You can go to the relevant provisions and check them out. You can even look at your e-text for further information. The other bail that can be granted is when charge sheet is not filed within the stipulated 60 or 90 days, you become entitled to bail. But this has to be granted, you have to apply for this. The court will not automatically release you on bail just because charge sheet is not filed within 60 or 90 days. You have to apply, and you have to apply for it till the filing of the charge sheet. So once charge sheet is filed, suppose I just sit over my rights, then I cannot apply for bail later. Now the other rights of the accused apart from the right against or right to bail is right not to be arrested. Now there was an amendment brought into this Code of Criminal Procedure stating that people who are, and this is a aftershoot of the Joginder Kumar case that we saw in the last module, that people who have been arrested for offences which are punishable with 7 years or less should not ordinarily be arrested. The police should send them notice, and when they come to the police station, the police, upon questioning, if it feels that yes, arrest is necessary, should arrest, otherwise should not arrest, if custodial interrogation is not required. Now this provision has not been implemented. In Arnesh Kumar's case, this was the issue before the court on whether people who are arrested in offences which are punishable with less than 7 years should be arrested at all or they should not be arrested. And in Arnesh Kumar's case, the Supreme Court held that in such offences, the police should not immediately arrest but satisfy themselves about the necessity of the arrest and give reasons for the same to the magistrate before arresting a person. Now the other rights of the accused under the CRPC are that a person who is arrested shall not be subjected to more restraint than is necessary to prevent his escape. Every police officer or other person arresting a person without a warrant shall tell him of the full particulars of the offence for which he is arrested or other grounds for such arrest. When the offence is a bailable offence, then I should be informed that it's a bailable offence and that I have a right to be released on bail. The police officer, again, many of the guidelines of the D.K. Basu case have been now brought in through amendments of the CRPC. So the right to have a friend or relative informed about my arrest has now been incorporated in the CRPC about the whereabouts of that the person should be told the whereabouts of the accused. Similarly, another right which is there in the D.K. Basu case, which has now been incorporated in the CRPC, is the right to have medical examination which may afford evidence that he has not committed a particular offence or that an offence against his body has been committed, such as torture, and the copy of this report shall be given to the accused. The other important right of the accused is the right to remain present throughout the trial. Now this issue has come up in several cases. In a very landmark judgment, State of Maharashtra versus Dr. Praful Desai, the witness was in the US and had to give a deposition. He couldn't come down to India. So an application was made that he should be allowed to be give his evidence on the basis of video conferencing. The accused objected to this, saying that I have a right to be tried in my presence, and video conferencing does not mean my presence. In this case, the Supreme Court held that video conferencing is if a trial is held in video conferencing and the accused can see the witness present his evidence, then that would amount to trial in the presence of the accused. There are several other rights given to the accused under the Code of Criminal Procedure. One of the major rights which has come about after the discussion in the Joginder Kumar case is the right not to be arrested. Now, the CRPC was in Joginder Kumar's case, as we rightly know, the Supreme Court had said that a person should not be arrested if there is no evidence against that person. Now, this has come about as a result of the discussion and 3 reports of the Police Commission, which said that the right to arrest is the single largest cause for corruption in the police force. So the courts have constantly discouraged and they said that the right to arrest has also led to use of it arbitrarily, and around 42% of the jail population should not be there in the first place. That means that there are many innocent people who have been arrested, and the power to arrest is being misused both by citizens as well as the police. So the court had said that the parliament should make a law. The parliament did make a law. It brought in an amendment in the CRPC stating that a person who's accused of an offence which is punishable with 7 years or less should not generally be arrested unless there is need for custodial interrogation. Otherwise, the person should be called to the police station, a notice should be sent, the person should be questioned, and a charge sheet should be filed, and the person can be tried without being arrested. Now, this amendment, even though it was brought into the Code of Criminal Procedure, was never enforced. So, in Arnesh Kumar's case, the issue before the court was, there were 2 issues, that can the person who is arrested in a case which is not a very serious offence, should that person be arrested at all? And the second question was that what if the FIR or the case itself is a false one, then should the person be arrested or not? So the issue was that in many cases notices were sent to the accused, and there was a stage which was known as preliminary inquiry. In the next module, we will be looking at one of the judgments which deal with preliminary inquiry. But in the Arnesh Kumar case, the issue was that in cases, this was a case arising out of section 498A, which is cruelty to a married woman. The question was that should men be arrested or families be arrested in a case like this without any investigation, because arrest can be made as soon as an FIR is filed. So the court said that they should not be automatically arrested, and said that this is not just in a case of 498A, but also in other cases like corruption cases, corporate cases, and all cases which are punishable with less than 7 years of imprisonment. Automatic arrest should not be made. The police should call the accused person, should talk to the accused person, and then if the police decide to arrest, they should give reasons why they want to arrest the person. These reasons have to be sent to the magistrate, who will then look at the reasons and then decide whether the person should be arrested or not be arrested. Otherwise, the person should not be arrested in all cases which are punishable with 7 years of imprisonment or less. The other right of the accused is that when you are arrested, you cannot be handcuffed. As we have already said, handcuffing is not permitted without the permission of the court. The person should not be subjected to more restraint. If you go to the courts, you will find that sometimes police officers are walking with the accused holding their hands. This is because they should not be subjected to more restraint than is necessary to stop them from running away. If a person is not dangerous criminal, he should not be tied in ropes, he should not be handcuffed, he should be subjected, because a person's human dignity is not lost just because the person is arrested, and a person is presumed innocent till found guilty. The person, when arresting a person without a warrant, now one of the things in a cognizable offence, the police can arrest anybody without a warrant. That is the right. So if an FIR or has been filed against you, you can be arrested without a warrant. But the police are supposed to inform you of the grounds of your arrest. Why have you been arrested? What is the case under which you've been arrested? What are the charges against you? And most importantly, are you entitled to bail or not? If it is a bailable offense, you have to be informed that it is a bailable offense. You have a right to be released on bail, and you can exercise your right of bail. Some of the other rights of the accused, which we will be looking at now, have been already stated in D.K. Basu's case. Now these have been now brought in under the CRPC, and so now they are part of our statutory rights of all accused persons. One of the most important ones is that the right to be informed, not just you to be informed, but also your family or friend to be informed about the grounds of arrest and where the accused is kept. So not just that the person has been arrested, but the person is in such and such a lockup or such and such a jail, that also has to be informed to the accused person. The second right which has been incorporated is the right to medical examination. I have the right to ask the police that I should be subjected to medical examination, either to prove that I have not committed an offense. So for example, if I am arrested in a case where in a rape case, for example, I say I want to undergo a medical examination so that it can be proved that I have not committed rape. The second is that I have a right to medical examination to show that I have been tortured, or that there is an offense has been committed against me. For example, if I have exercised my right to private defense, a person has attacked me, and therefore in order to defend myself, I have attacked that person. The injury marks on my body will be evidence to show that I was attacked. So these rights are there with the accused. So it is not discretionary to the police whether they want to send you for medical examination or not. You also as an accused have a right to say that I want to go for a medical examination. And the copy of this medical report has to be given to the accused. The other right which we have spoken about is the right to legal aid, the right to legal representation that now has also been institutionalized in the CRPC. Another very important right which the accused has is the right to remain present throughout the trial. So the trial has to go on in the presence of the accused so that he can talk to his lawyer and tell him what kind of defense to take. Whether is the witness speaking the truth? Is there something that is being suppressed? What are the questions that the lawyer needs to ask at the time of the cross-examination? So it is very important that the accused should be there at the trial, and he has the right to interact with his lawyer all through the trial. Otherwise, the whole purpose of legal representation becomes a mere formality. Now, one of the important cases that came up on video conferencing, on presence of the accused, is on video conferencing. This happened in 2003 in a judgment relating to medical negligence. The case was filed against the doctor, and one of the witnesses, who was a doctor from the United States of America, could not come to India to give evidence. So he requested that his evidence be taken by way of video conferencing. The accused objected to the same, saying that an evidence which is recorded through video conferencing is not a trial in the presence of the accused. Rejecting his contention, the Supreme Court said that video conferencing can be permitted when the witness cannot come physically to the court, as long as the accused has the right to watch the witness when he is deposing and has the right to consult with his lawyer. It will not amount to violation of this right. In a recent judgment of Shahabuddin's case, where Shahabuddin, who is accused of a case, was sought to be transferred out of his jail to another jail, it was directed that that his trial be held through video conferencing, where he will be in the jail and the witnesses will be in the court, and the trial will be conducted. And it was held that since he will be able to watch the witnesses in the court and he will be able to speak to his lawyer through video conferencing, this also would not amount to violation of his right to be tried in the presence of the accused. So in this module we have looked at bail, the importance of bail, the types of bail that can be granted, and we've looked at other rights of the accused which come up. You can look at the e-text for more information on bail and other rights of the accused. Thank you.